Okay, welcome everyone to the first lecture in the new Symposium series titled Rediscovering the Lost Art of Statecraft. Statecraft is defined as the art of government and diplomacy, but some may find it hard to believe that such things could be considered an art form, that the world of politics is and always has been rather a pseudo-art form, that of flattery and self-advancement. This is one of the reasons why we decided on doing this symposium, to go through currents of history that showcase the true art of real statecraft. In matters of politics, it is easy to get caught up in the sensationalism of the now. Decisions are made in a box with little or no consideration for its effects in the future. Today, we find ourselves headed towards a precipice, and yet those who hold the reins are unable to see past their own feet. This is a crisis that has arisen not only because of a lack of leadership, but also because of a lack of a moral citizenry who consider themselves active participants of the whole, rather than detached voyeurs of the ensuing mayhem. The pinnacle of governance in statecraft is when its chosen leaders are not only able to see the outcome of their actions into the distant future, but it is when the people of such a governance will hold a responsibility as well, to uphold the basic principles required for any state's formation and continuation. Only then can a government realize its highest achievement, to be truly created of the people, by the people, and for the people. In such a state, everyone is to play a role, and no one should consider themselves exempt from the active participations in the affairs of their state. A true citizen must not only be concerned with the affairs of their state, but they must feel a sense of responsibility for its conduct and actions as well. Today, statecraft has become a lost art, or at least a largely forgotten one. It is for this reason that the Rising Tide Foundation has chosen to address this subject as the next series of our symposia. The first movement of the symposium will deal primarily with ancient Greece and ancient China, with a focus on the philosophical questions one needs to first pose to oneself when contemplating the creation of the most just, free, and advanced state. For we must be able to envision the ideal before we can hope to create something that can partake in it, albeit imperfectly. The second movement will go through the founding of the sovereign nation state and will cover Dante, Cusa, Leibniz, the Cameralist tradition, the principle of Westphalia, and the birth of international law. The third movement will cover the founding of the Republic of the United States and go through the period of the Winthrops, the Massachusetts Bay Colony, Benjamin Franklin, and Abraham Lincoln. And the fourth movement will cover the new global paradigm that has emerged in the 20th century and will discuss Che Kanta Diop and Pan-Africanism, the Bandung Conference held by China, India, and African nations on the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence. And we'll probably add more to it, but that's what we have so far. And we'll finally end with the class discussing Plato's reference to what should be the role of a poet in a republic, keeping in mind Shelley's famous statement that it is the poets who are the unacknowledged legislators of the world. So without further ado, I'm happy to introduce the first class to our symposium titled Plato and Confucius, Spiritual Brothers and Philosopher Kings Living at the Two Ends of the World Island, which will be presented by our friend and colleague, Dr. Quan.
Okay, thank you, Cynthia, for the presentation, and thanks to everyone to be here this afternoon. So, without further ado, I will start my presentation. So, I would like to come back a little bit to the title, Plato and Confucius, Spiritual Brothers and Philosophers, Kings Living at the Two Ends of the World Island. I'm sure that for people like you know perfectly that the expression world island is related to geopolitics. So I would like to present statecraft today as the practical expression of ethics and politics. And ethics and politics is a branch of philosophy. And in Chinese, philosophy is Zhe Sui, and the word Zhe is written by a graph having 3 components. The first component is a mouth, the second component is a hand, and the third component is an axe, or you can imagine any tool, and not necessarily an axe, but any instrument. So the mouth symbolize what in Greek would be logos, the speech, but you know that logos also means the mind or the spirit or the principle. So in Chinese, the mouth has the same meaning than the Greek word logos. So the mouth combined with the hands and combined with the image of an axe or an instrument means that philosophy is the deep union of mind, heart, and hands to create tools. Okay, here the tool is an axe, but once again, it can be any tool and not necessarily an axe. Why an axe? Because in ancient China, the axe is the symbol of royal authority. So it's related to statecraft, of course. So the deep union of the heart, of the mind, and of the hands to create tools in a specific project. But ethics and politics is the branch of philosophy that deal with justice. So it's the deep union with of the mind, of the heart, and of the hands to create the city, to create justice within the city. And in Chinese, you have many words for statecraft, but I chose 4 words that I think are truly meaningful. The first word is wen zhu. Wen zhu means the government by culture or the culture government. The second word is jing shu, meaning the word, the classical word. Okay, classical means the word under the influence of the ideas of beauty, of goodness, and of truth. Another word for statecraft in Chinese is Jinglun, meaning the speech about the classical word. So those 3 ideas are more or less equivalent. On a more practical level, statecraft in China can be perceived as Wang Dao or Pa Dao. Wang Dao means the way of the king, and here king you have to understand the philosopher king, of course, the monarch. For the rest of my class, when I say monarch, I means the philosopher king. And Pa Tao, Pa is translated exactly by hegemon, meaning the way of the hegemon or the way of domination. And the graph to write king in Chinese is 3 horizontal lines connected by a vertical line. So the king is the vertical lines reuniting heaven, the top lines, and earth, the bottom lines, with the human beings, which is the middle line. So the king is the one that will bring harmony and justice to a society or to a place. And the Chinese character for hegemon, Pa, is very interesting because you have the component indicating rain and the component indicating a bright moon and the component indicating a war chariot, meaning that the hegemon is someone powerful, capable to provoke rain. He is a shining moon, and he's capable to deal with war chariot. But he's not someone who will harmonize heaven, earth, and human being. So a hegemon is not someone negligible, but it's not someone who will bring justice either. In Chinese statecraft, you have 5 pairs of opposite. I just talked about the first pair of opposite, which is between the way of the monarch and the way of the hegemon. The second pair of opposite is between virtue and talent. Okay, virtue in Chinese is de, and talent is sai. Once again, if you know how a Chinese character is written, you understand the deep meaning of the word. The word de, virtue, is composed by the heart, the component for upright and the component meaning to make things move or to realize things. Okay, so virtue means the upright heart capable to realize things, to make things done. And what is interesting, what the word sai, meaning talent, is the word in the Chinese word slave is said nu sai. Okay, so someone having a talent is perceived as being subordinate to someone having the upright heart, capable to make things done or capable to make things to be realized. That's the second pair of opposites in Chinese statecraft. The third pair of opposite is between Wen and Wu, Wen being the civil government and Wu being the military, which normally are under the civil government. The fourth pair is called Yongren. Yongren means to be capable to use people. Okay, so the opposite is between choosing the right person for the right task, the right job, and not being capable to choose the right person for the right task or the right job. So, which is a major quality for any leader. And finally, the last pair of complementary opposites in Chinese statecraft is called shangxia, meaning the leaders and the led. But with the idea that the led will follow the leaders if the leaders are capable to bring justice. And I would like to remind that the Latin word for virtue, virtus, is exactly the same than the Chinese word, right? Because vir, tus, means manly, upright strength, okay? So if I remind you, the three components of the Chinese word for virtue is the upright heart, capable to make things move or to make things to be done. So virtus in Latin is the same, manly, upright, strength. In ancient times, there are so many things that are exactly the same in the West and in the East that you please bear with me. I often like to bring those rapprochements. And the subject of ethics and politics is justice once again. And I want to repeat, it's the mind, heart, and hands deeply united together to create justice. And before keeping on with my presentation, I would like to tell a story coming from a 2001 historical drama, a Chinese TV series called the Kangxi Wang Chao, meaning the imperial court of the Kangxi emperor. And it's a scene where you see the Kangxi emperor ruling from 1661 to 1722, just to give you an idea if you don't know him. You have the Kangxi emperor, a lofty scholar, and a petty nobleman. The petty nobleman came to see the emperor for a favor. Okay, so after a little chat between the three, the emperor gave the petty nobleman the favor he was asking for, and the guy left. And the lofty scholar looked at the emperor with a little bit of indignation. So the emperor answered the guy, come on, man, give me a break. Okay, I need lofty people like you, but I also need petty men like him, because I need some petty men for certain specific tasks. What the Kangxi emperor meant by that is that we cannot rely on the ambitions of technical man to realize the foundations of the city or to create the foundation of a philosophical life, meaning a philosophical life being the journey to beauty, goodness, and truth. And beauty, as all of you know, is a fancy word for justice and harmony, which is exactly the goal of statecraft. But we also need technical man for certain specific tasks. So the true ruler, because he has in himself the charismatic virtue precisely, he's capable to be the circle, to be the unifying factor that will attract both gentlemen and both petty men having technical qualities, and deeply at the root to synchronize their action for a common higher good that we call justice or beauty. And I would like once again to make some advertisement for the Chinese image of the Taiji tool, which means the diagram of the Supreme. I'm sure all of you saw that diagram. The half of the diagram is a black fish and the other half is a white fish. But most people would neglect the third element, which is the most important, the circle that will reunite the black fish and the white fish. And in this case, the black fish would be the petty man and the white fish would be the noble or the lofty scholar. And His Majesty is the circle, okay, the unifying element that would bring them together deeply to work for a higher common good, justice, or beauty. And it's the same diagram of the Supreme can be used because the white fish can be the symbol of heaven and the black fish can be the symbol of earth. And heaven is the principles, okay? Principles like justice, like beauty, like goodness, like truth. And the black side are the realities, okay? The realities, the geopolitics, the geostrategy, the diplomacy, etc. And I would like to propose to everybody here to make an exercise of visualization, because I will use the image that I invite you to visualize for the rest of my presentation. We said that statecraft is the practical expression of justice, okay? So the triangle defines 7 spots. You have a spot at the center, you have three spots inside the triangle and 3 spots outside the triangle, right? I would like to use that image to show the deep interaction between the principles and the practical realities. All of you already in the West that the center represent the principles, okay? And I don't want to discuss it now because it will be the main part of my presentation. I want to discuss the 3 inner corners and the 3 outer corners of the triangle. The inner left corner is ethics and politics, okay? And ethics and politics means respect, self-respect, and respect for others, okay? The inner right corner is education and justice, and the inner top corner represent the 3 other major virtues according to the teaching of classical antiquity, okay? One of the virtue we already discussed is justice. The other 3 major virtues as understood by classical antiquity are, of course, wisdom, courage, and moderation, okay? Sometimes said at temperance, okay? But I prefer the word moderation, is the same. Now I'm speaking of the outer 3 corners of the triangle. On the left side, on the same side than ethics and politics for the inner side, you have what I call MC, okay? I will give the abbreviations because it's a memo technique to remember easily. The left side, MC, the right side, MD, and the top side, ME, okay? So it's MC, MD, ME, so it's easier to remember. MC is for mythology and conversation, okay? What I mean by mythology and conversation is paradigms, for example. Do we have an open paradigm? Do we have a closed paradigm? narratives, okay, because depending of the kind of mentality and of epistemology that we have, we would have narratives that would be completely different. The psyops, okay, the infamous psyops are part of mythology and conversation, okay. If we have lofty paradigms, we can have lofty psyops. If we would have down-to-earth paradigms or closed paradigms, well, we would have the psyops that would be in harmony of our paradigms. And social engineering is part of mythology and conversation. Because once again, social engineering often is associated with shenanigans, with bad things, with manipulation of the minds and so on. It's true if the paradigms is not lofty, but if you have a lofty paradigm, you can have good social engineering, okay? And it would be called education and not social engineering if you want. And so that's for the outer left side, and for the outer right side, MD, I call it modelizations and diplomacy, okay? If you have education and justice in the inner right corner, you would have good things at the outside. But if you don't have education and justice in the inner right corner, in the outer right corner, you would have domination instead of multilateralism, okay? And you have geopolitics and geostrategy too in the MD corner, meaning modelization and diplomacy. Because once again, geopolitics or geostrategy by themselves are not bad things, okay? Those are instruments, okay? An instrument depends of the mind that use them, okay? As I said at the beginning, it's the deep union of the heart, the mind, and the hands creating tools to make something. That something can be justice or that something can be war. So it depends what is at the inner mind or what is the epistemology, the paradigm that is used. And finally, the outer top corner, ME, means military and economy. Okay, because I'm not against the army or the navy. I think that all self-respecting nation needs an army and a navy. But once again, it's a tool. Okay, what do you want to do with that army or that navy? And the economy, of course, if you have a good insight, it's not the speculative, exploitative economy, but would be the physical economy as proposed by Lyndon LaRouche, for example. And I would like to give an example, a practical example of that. When the Chinese foreign minister Wang Yi went to the Middle East at the end of March this year, he proposed a 5-point initiative for stability and security in the Middle East, right? And the 5 points goes exactly with what I said, okay? The first point is mutual respect, okay? So mutual respect is in relation with what I said with ethics and politics, okay? The inner left corner. And after that, he talked about justice and security, okay? So the right corner. And the point 3, 4, 5 was non-nuclear proliferation, security, and finally economic cooperation. Okay, so exactly the point of the top corner. So just to take that practical example to say that it's not empty speech, it can be applied in reality if you have the true desire to create justice. And if you have that true desire, you would use the appropriate tools to go on that pathway, which is the way of the king or the way of the monarch, instead of the way of the hegemon, which is the first complementary opposite that I talked at the beginning of the discussion. Now, we go to the center of my presentation. Okay, so we talk about the left, the right, the top inner part, the left, the right, the top outer part of the triangle. Now we speak of the center of the triangle. Okay, and here is truly to show to what deep extent Plato and Confucius were truly spiritual brothers, because when I read their speech or their, their book, I don't even have to stretch to make them match, okay, because they match exactly. And you will see how, okay, even I would use number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and they use exactly the same step, one with Greek words and the other one with Chinese words. But I mean, that's perfectly normal. Okay, now I would like to invite you once again to have a second step in the visualization exercise, okay? At the center, imagine a chariot with 2 horses and with a charioteer, okay? For people who have read Plato, you immediately remember chapter 4 of the Republic or Politeia. Okay, before going further, I would like to remind that Confucius was born in 551 BCE and he died 72 years later in 479 BCE. And Plato was born in 428 BCE and he died 80 years later in 348 BCE. I would like the next information, maybe not many people know, and maybe I would have the honor to teach you something today. The name that we know that that famous Greek philosopher Plato, well, it's not his name, it's his nickname, okay? Because Plato means the guy with broad shoulders. And his name was Aristocles. But by tradition, we know the guy by his nickname and but not by his name. And after that parenthesis, I would like to go to the center, okay? Please keep in mind the image of the chariot, the horses, and the charioteer, because I would like to go back to the chapter 1, chapter 2, and chapter 3 of the Republic. For those who did not read the Republic lately, I would like to remind you that in chapter 1, there was a dialogue between Socrates and a certain guy named Cephalos, okay? And that Cephalos was an old rich merchant from another Greek city that was living at the Piraeus and having, I think, a workshop of I don't know, I don't remember what, but a workshop, and it was a rich old man, okay? And his name was Cephalos. And Socrates asked Cephalos, please give me a definition of what is justice. And Cephalos gave the following definition, which is to give to each his due, okay? So please remember that, to give to each his due. And Socrates has the son of Cephalos, Polemarchus. And since Polemarchus was a young man, he gave, according to me, the same definition than his father, but a little bit more naive, if you want. Okay, so Polemarchus said that justice is to give good to friends and to give evil to enemies. Okay, that's the typical answer of a young man. But I would say that it's the same answer than his father. And finally, Thrasymachus, a powerful man from Athens, was asked the same question, and he answered, justice for me is the advantage of the powerful. Okay, so now we have 3 definitions of justice: to give each his due, to give good to friends but evil to enemies, and justice is the advantage of the powerful. In chapter 2, Glaucon, which is a friend of Socrates, wouldn't play the dumb because that's not what he truly believed. Okay, because Glaucon is a refined man. Don't take that answer as his true answer, but it's just something that he throw to keep on the play. So Glaucon answered that justice for him is a social convention to prevent disorder and chaos. Okay, for those of you who have read 17th century and 18th century Englishman pragmatist, you recognize, of course, the Leviathan by Thomas Hobbes, the ideas of John Locke, the idea of David Hume. Okay, so justice is a social convention to prevent disorder and chaos. People obey because of fear of chaos. Thus, people will create society, compacts, association. You need to control the people by their desire for rewards and their fear of punishment. So that is exactly the philosophy of the legalist school in China, who was developing a little bit at the same time than Confucius. Okay, so if you hear something like you need to control the people by their desires for rewards and their fear of punishment, it's exactly the practical side of the idea that justice is a social convention. And what I would say for the next 30 seconds is quite famous in the Republic of Plato, and it's quite laughable. Justice being a social convention is the appearance of justice and not justice itself that matters. People complaining about injustices are either old, weak, or cowards. So with that kind of mentality, you cannot expect much for justice, of course. And Plato has a name for each of these steps, okay? The guy that said, give to each his due, good to friends and evil to enemies, he's called a democratic man. The man who say that justice is the advantage of the powerful, he's called a plutocratic man. And the guy who said that justice is a social convention, I would say that he's a democratic man, but I would say a B, okay? Because there wouldn't be a democratic man A, which is the democratic man that would say that justice is honor. Okay, so the democratic man, when he is at the first step of his development, would say that justice is simply a social convention. But the democratic man, when he is more developed, would say that justice is a question of honor. And in chapter 3, Socrates will discuss the creation of the city and the education of the guardians. And by discussing the creation of the city and the creation and the education of the guardians, he will introduce the next two categories of man, or of the development of consciousness or the journey of awareness, which is the aristocratic man. And the aristocratic man would say that justice is to let everyone be educated and let them develop agape. Okay, and agape is the deep human emotion associated with creativity and discovery. So the aristocratic man is the man or the woman, of course, that will encourage agape, which is the deep human emotion associated with creativity and discovery. And when you have that deep emotions of creativity and discovery, there is no need to scare you with punishment, and there is no need to woo you with rewards, because the agape and your own personal adventure of discovery and creativity will be your own rewards by themselves. And of course, there's no need to talk about the democratic or the plutocratic man, who are even lower than the democratic man version A or version B. And the last kind of man that Socrates will introduce in his discussion of the creation of the city and the education of the guardians is the monarch. Okay, and I could say that the monarch and the aristocrat, they are more or less the same, in the sense that the monarch is simply the first of the aristocrats. Okay, he is also encouraging the development of agape and creativity, but his companions, the aristocrat, would find him a little bit special, so they would give him a special place of the first among equals, if you want. So the monarch and the aristocrat practically is the same level, if you want. And the first four answers were non-metaphysical. Okay, what I mean by non-metaphysical is that those answers are not rooted in deep reflection on the nature of reality. In a nutshell, those answers stem from the understanding, on the lower understanding, but a certain understanding that might is right. Okay, even the might of brutal force, or the might of money and wealth, of course, because money and wealth is a form of might, and or the legality of the obligation. Okay, when the Democrat stage B said that you need to woo people with rewards or to scare them with punishment, well, that's a kind of might, but there is no legitimacy, no justice, because the Democrat stage B said that justice is important because of the appearance of justice and not because of a true principle. Okay, when we see the tribunals nowadays that would make shenanigans to try to negotiate a sentence or things like that, it's the exact illustration of that kind of mentality of the democratic stage B. So Socrates' answer, beginning in chapter 3 and ending in chapter 10, which is the end of the Republic, of course, is metaphysical, because it is with the belief in the existence of a natural and universal order of some kind, and especially the rational research of such an order. Okay, because when the aristocrat and the first of them, the monarch, they are encouraging activities that will promote agape, that deep human emotion associated with discovery and creativity, because those people want to look for that rational and universal order that you can call beauty, goodness, and truth, because I am speaking of Plato now, or you can call with the names that touch. And when I say that Plato and Confucius are perfectly brothers, spiritual brothers, it's because in chapter 2, paragraph 4 of the the selected sayings of Confucius, you have exactly the same steps but with other words. Okay, so Confucius would say that at 15 he would settle to study, at 30 he wouldn't have a stand in society, in 40 he's no more confused, at 50 he's capable to hear the will of heaven, at 60 he's capable to hear the will of heaven but without complaining, and at 70 he would be capable to act and never break the universal law. Okay, so you have exactly the same, but Confucius would rather use that kind of sentences or phrases rather than to use the words monarch, aristocrats, democrats, plutocrats, democrats. And there's one last category that Plato mentioned also. And I think that I would have the honor maybe to teach you another fancy word today, and which is the mob rule. Okay, but the mob rule has a fancy word from Greek, and it's ochlocracy. Okay, ochlocracy, ochlocrats, and it means the mob rule. Meaning it's even lower than the Democrats. At least the Democrats will give good to friends and evil to enemies. So there is a certain order, there's a certain logic, even if it's a lower logic in his justice. Okay, but when you have the mob rule or the ochlocratic man, it's completely okay. I have a message that someone asked me to spell it again. Okay, ochlocracy, ochlocracy, okay, which is the fancy word for mob rule. So I said that the Democrat at least have a certain logic in his lower justice, but with the mob rule, it's total chaos and disorganization. They don't even have. Thank you, Luke, for writing ochlocracy in the chat. And they don't even have a minimal order. And I would say that the philosophers of antiquity, either Greek or Chinese, what they hate the most is truly the mob rule. Because from the democratic man, it's possible to teach them. But at the level of the mob rule, there's absolutely no hope to teach them anything at all. And the next thing that I would say that in statecraft, we will talk, of course, about war, okay? But we talk often about the external war and not the internal war. So I will give you two quotations. First, a quotation by the famous Sun Tzu, which is a strategist and a philosopher, Chinese, of course, of the 6th century BCE. And I start the quote: "War is of the utmost importance because it concerns the life and death of the state and of the people." Okay, of course. And I would like to stress the fact that he was speaking of war, not centered in battles, but centered on the people and on the state. And the second quote is, well, it's by me, but it's not really by me because it was inspired by Confucius, okay? Because I will give after the true quote from Confucius that inspired me to write the following lines to illustrate the inner war. So the inner war is of the utmost importance because it concerns the life and death of my inner and my outer reality. Okay, and that is derived from the following quotation from Confucius from the same Lun Yu, Selected Sayings, but this time it's chapter 4, paragraph 5. Okay, I start the quotation. Wealth and high rank are what people desire. If they are attained by not following the way, do not dwell in them. Poverty and mean rank are what people hate. If they are attained by following the way, please do not depart from that. So you can stay poor and with a mediocre rank if you follow the way. if one takes away run, okay, run is a Chinese character that is symbolized by a person with the symbol 2. But I would like to come back to what means run, okay? I will finish the second part of the quotation. I will come back with a discussion on the run. If one takes away run from a gentleman, wherein is he worthy of the name? There's no interval so short that the gentleman deviates from run. Though rushing full tilt, it is there. Though head over heels, it is there. I said that a run is the deep human emotion associated with discovery and creativity. And Mike Billington, in his paper on the Chinese control optimism, used the Greek word agape to translate run. And I think it was an excellent translation. And I proposed the English word enthusiasm to translate run and to translate agape, because enthusiasm comes from Greek and it's mean the divine within. Okay, for those who prefer to say the God within, I would say that it's equivalent. So the divine within or the God within, enthusiasm or run or agape, exactly the same. You know that Archimedes, who is famous for his expression eureka, when the Roman troops invaded Syracuse in the 3rd century BCE, the Roman soldiers found him busy to think about mathematical problems, and he was completely unaware that the city has been invaded. Okay, so for me, that is truly run enthusiasm, that you are so absorbed in your creative task that you don't really care about the war or invading troops. Of course, it's an extreme example, but that extreme example is quite illustrative for me. And from someone who is well known for his life full of run, agape, or enthusiasm, because Archimedes was absolutely one of the humans that live all his life lighted by the deep human emotions associated by discovering and creativity. And in traditional Chinese explication, often the word run would be explained as run is when there's two human together, okay, because of the symbol for human and the symbol for two. But I would propose another explanation, but it doesn't mean that the classical explanation is not good, but I would propose that run, the two is not two human, but is one human exponent two. Okay, the two is the human to the square. Okay, the human at the higher level when he's uplifted by that energy of creativity and of discovery. Okay, I have other things that I can discuss, but I don't know if I talked for about, well, almost an hour. So time flies. So maybe it's a good moment to have a discussion and interaction. I don't know if it's going to be Cynthia that will be the moderator to take the question and so on.
I'll let Matt take that.
No, Cynthia, it's all yours. I have a neighbor making a lot of noise behind me, so I can't have my mic on.
Okay. Well, yeah, I wasn't expecting you to stop at that point, but that was wonderful, Quan. As usual, very, very enlightening. Does anyone have any questions off the bat, or do we want to maybe have a more open discussion?
I have a question.
Yes.
Nobody else? Okay. Quan, I've had a few people when I and thank you so much for sharing those insights. When I was talking about your class with a few people, I had gotten the response from several that, and these are people who are educated people. They do know Confucius and I think to a certain degree Plato, but their response was surprising. They said, "Oh, Plato and Confucius couldn't be two individuals more that are more different and have nothing to do with each other. And I said, well, what do you mean? And the response I got from one individual was, well, Confucius is the ultimate pragmatist and Plato is the ultimate idealist. And it's something I'd encountered here and there.
They are both.
They're both.
I don't know if I'm allowed to do this. I kind of had the same question. Can I just add one qualification to precisely what Matt brought up?
Sure, Dave.
Confucius brought up the mandate of heaven, and that's been brought up by the Schiller Institute. But so there is that metaphysical thing, but I've encountered precisely the same thing where Confucius tends to keep everything in very practical terms. So where is the metaphysical part? It's true, it seems a lot more practical, and Plato seems a lot more.
Well, I said, when you understand deeply his quotation in chapter 2, paragraph 4, that's the idealist way of Confucius. There's a journey of consciousness. And what I try to symbolize with my triangle that I asked you to visualize, that's the inside of the triangle is the inner journey, and the outside of the triangle is the practical expression of this inner journey. When Plato would say the aristocratic man, Confucius would say at 60, I'm capable to hear the will of heaven without complaining. And when Plato say the monarch, Confucius would say, I can act spontaneously without breaking the universal law. And when Plato say the democratic man, Confucius would say, now I'm no more confused. So it's a question of different vocabulary, because I'm very happy by your question. And that's why I stopped after, well, I realized it was an hour, but I always want to stop at what I feel as the middle of the presentation, because it gives the occasion to clarify things like that. When I use the image of the triangle, and that is obviously to stress the fact that there is an inner journey by Plato and by Confucius, and there is an outer journey by Plato and by Confucius, okay? The center of the triangle and the outside of the triangle. And I would say that if I can only transmit that message today, those two are perfect spiritual brothers, and the two are not idealists and not practical man. The two are true man. Okay, a true man is at the same time a person with an inner life and a person with a practical life. In other words, a gentleman is not a clumsy nerd, but a gentleman is not a bastard either. Okay, so the gentleman has to be someone with an inner life, so he's not a bastard, but a gentleman is also capable to navigate his practical life. He's not a clumsy nerd. And Plato and Confucius was neither a clumsy nerd nor a bastard, of course.
Yeah, and for anybody who's a little bit confused about some of that still, Cynthia's class, I see that as a bit of a plug for next week, when Cynthia will go through a little bit more in depth into the real Plato that many people may not have realized when they were reading his dialogues in school. Cynthia, do you have anything else?
No, I see that Satomi has a question. Satomi, do you want to just ask Quan your question directly?
Oh, okay. Well, hi, Quan.
Hi, how are you?
And I really enjoy, as much as I could understand, because I haven't read Plato or Confucius, but have you heard of the book, The Art of War? Because I've heard a lot of military art of war. It's a Chinese. My friend had the book. He gave it to me, but I haven't read it. And I'm wondering if you have heard of that.
Yes, of course. I read the 13 chapters of the Art of War. Yes.
And is it would you consider it like externally, it's more of an external kind of it's not really deeply philosophical?
Yes. Sun Tzu is often understood as a strategist, and he was a strategist. And once again, I'm very happy that you asked that question, because in my presentation, I talked about Confucius and Plato, but I could have taken Sun Tzu and Plato, okay? Because the art of war is not only a manual of military strategies or of geopolitics, okay, to use contemporary words. The Art of War is a book of philosophy, okay? What I said in one of my quotation is that war is of the utmost importance because it concerns the life and death of the state, and it's concerned also the people. Okay, so when you talk about the people and the life and death of the state, it's not only war at the ordinary sense of the word, but also the creation of the city as discussed in chapter 3 of the Republic. Okay, when I said that I offer as one part of the discussion today the 5 definitions of justice, and Socrates will come with his definition of justice in chapter 3 to chapter 10, because his answer is in the 7th chapter from 3 to 10. When he described the creation of the city, he was doing the task of a philosopher. And in the 13th chapter of the Art of War by Sun Tzu, he was also describing the creation of a city, even if he decided to name his book The Art of War instead of the Republic.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Well, it's kind of like the cities of refuge in the Bible, the where you go for when you go for when those are cities where it's when you commit a crime that's not premeditated.
Yes. I'm not sure that I understood you when you're talking of the city where that you can't refuse. But
well, that's a biblical. In the Bible, they have cities of refuge for because really, a tooth for a tooth and eye for an eye. But then, if it was not premeditated murder or killing, you run to the cities of refuge.
Of course, so, and it's very interesting.
Yeah, they make provisions. Yeah.
Of course, and once again, I'm very happy you mentioned that, because once again, it's the journey of awareness. Okay, when you say eye for eye and tooth for tooth, well, it's the definition of polemarchos: give good to friends and evil to enemies. Okay, that's the democratic man. And when you say, if there is a certain reason that we can forgive that person and give him shelter and blah, 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 well, that's the beginning of the democratic man, okay? Meaning that we have to scare people with punishment, but also to woo them with rewards if their behavior have been not so bad, okay? So once again, you are giving a practical, you are giving a living example from history, from the Bible, illustrating once again the triangle. I wouldn't say the triangle because it's me who is giving the class today, and I decide to use that image of the inner journey, so the inside of the triangle, that would express itself at the outer, the practical level, in harmony with the level of the inner journey. If you are a democratic man, you will have democratic tones. If you are an democratic man, you wouldn't have democratic tools. If you're an aristocratic man, you wouldn't have aristocratic tools creating an aristocratic society. An aristocratic society is not a society formed by noble man in the sense of hereditary nobility, but a society formed by man having the level of consciousness at agape, meaning the desire to have the deep human emotion associated with creativity and discovery. Okay, so you always have an outside reality that is in harmony with the inside reality. I see many questions appearing on my screen, but I wouldn't let Cynthia choose the question, okay? Because I would be too disorganized or
no problem. I won't leave you hanging. All right. So Stephen, is that it? Satomi? Or...
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. So next, Stephen has a question for you.
Quan, thank you for a wonderful lecture. I really enjoyed that.
Thanks, Stephen.
Yeah. So my question is I guess pulls together two of your main elements. The first being the primary analogy between Plato and the hierarchy of justice versus Confucius, which is more a life cycle or evolutionary approach. And then the second theme I want to integrate into this is the kind of concept is not only is there the theoretical, but there's the practical. So in terms of a practical application of looking at that primary analogy and more on the Confucian interpretation of it or expression of it, has anyone thought to try to apply that to sort of a Carroll Quigley evolution of civilizations to see if there's parallels or analogies there? In terms, and you could express that either in the Platonic hierarchy or the Confucian, but I'm just wondering if anyone's actually worked and looked at the macro level in terms of humanity and civilization.
Yes, well, you know, with your question, Stephen, I think that I can talk for the next 3 hours, okay? But I would say that it's not, I think that Carroll Quigley is a good idea, but the name of the guy that springs to mind when you say that is Spengler, okay? Because in his book, The Decline of the West, he wouldn't talk about magical civilization, Promethean civilization, and that would go a little bit in terms of evolution of consciousness, okay? Because I think that you got me perfectly right, okay? What I want to convey this afternoon or this evening is that, once again, I come back to my image of the triangle. The true gentleman has an inner life, the inside of the triangle, and the true gentleman has an outer life, the outside of the triangle. Plato expressed it in terms of different kind of man having different kind of conception of justice, from the ochlocrats to the monarch. Confucius expressed it by other words, but it's the same. The guy at 15 can be a true person at 15 years old, of course. But please understand also that 15 years old is also a representation of a certain level of consciousness, understanding justice at a certain level, okay? When Polemachos say that justice is to give good to friends and to give evil to enemies, well, that's exactly the guy at 15 years old for Confucius, okay? So please understand the word democrat and the word 15 years old as level of consciousness. And if you have a certain level of consciousness, you will understand things according to that level of consciousness, and you will understand the concept of justice with the level of consciousness of a democrat or of a guy of 15 years old. And of course, if you have a 60 years old, or the level of consciousness corresponding to 60 years old Confucius, or the level of an aristocratic man, to use the Platonic jargon, you would have just the understanding of justice not as to give good to friends and to give evil to enemies, but rather to build a city where everyone will be educated in order to be capable to live his life, his everyday life, uplifted by the emotion of agape, which is the deep human emotion associated with creativity and discovery. And you understand, of course, that the city built upon the democratic man level, or the 15 years old level, is not the same city than the city built by the aristocratic mentality, or the 60 years old mentality, or I am capable to hear the will of heaven without complaining. And I think that you summarize perfectly the core message that I want to transmit this afternoon. Thank you, Stephen.
Well, I got my first gold star from Rising Tide. And I actually have
Okay.
Spengler, History of the World, I think, but I haven't got to reading it yet. So now I have to get off my lazy duff and do that. Thank you so much.
Okay, yeah, read that. It's very interesting.
Peter, you wrote some thoughts in the chat. Did you want to share them? Is Peter still on?
Peter is still on, but Peter might not know that he is also on mute.
Yeah.
Oh.
Oh yeah. Okay, I got it.
Am I speaking to Peter Mann?
Yeah, Peter the Man. Yes.
Okay, so
Hi.
okay,
Hi,
go
Dr.
the man.
Lee.
Hi, how are you?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Okay, this is a subject that I find very close to my heart. I'm also sort of a East-West kind of person, and probably like Dr. Lee, you know, we're educated sort of in both disciplines. I'm also very, very much interested in ancient civilizations, not just Chinese, but also from the West. So this is, you know, just perfect for me. I love it. Of course, I think that in this story of comparing or trying to equate Plato with Confucius, I think that Plato is much more into what we think of as philosophical issues such as existence or the soul, you know, or life after death or gods and stuff like that. Whereas Chinese, you know, of the 6th century BCE, they were probably much more concerned about governance and having a harmonious society for people to live in, especially when those times were, you know, very much in turmoil, and ordinary people were having a tough time because of the wars. And so he, I think Confucius put a lot of thought in it, even though, you know, like the Chinese really very strangely at that time gave up a lot of religious beliefs, whereas in the olden days they had gods, and in fact they, both the Zhou and the Shang before them, had supreme gods, which is you know, most of us from, you know, with Chinese education don't know about that. So when we say the mandate of heaven, actually we think of it as heaven, but not really. The word tian actually was a god. If you read very ancient Chinese scriptures, you'll see that they refer to tian as a god. And the same thing
Exactly.
as the Shang, they refer to their god, their supreme god, as Di, which we understand as we use the word Huang Di, the yellow emperor. or later on the Qin Shi Huangdi.
Exactly.
But that word was really adopted much later. So the original word meant for the Shang, their god, their supreme god, in fact. And what happens is that when their ancestors die, especially the royalties, they experience a kind of a deification, and they become an intermediate god, also taking the name D. So the gods, after they die, they will get the name D something. So it's like the last emperor was called Zhou Wang for the Shang, but he also has a temple name called Di Xin. So he becomes a god too when he died. So that's the, that's why I wrote a little bit there. That's from my own research, really, to find that it's very interesting that both Tian and Di are cognate with the Indo-European root for God, which is Diu, and all the god names come from this particular root. And interestingly, the first known two dynasties from China have gods with the same root. So that's just, reflection that, perhaps, culture is not the same as ethnicity. So we don't know, how it comes, but it's right here for us to contemplate, sort of. And in the sense that Plato, I think he talked about politics, and obviously, and he talked about souls and existence. So he thought about a lot more about those stuff, whereas Confucius thought little about gods. So he was just very, very much focused on how to have a good a country, a good society for people to live in. And in fact, when people asked him about gods, he said, respect the gods, but stay away from them. So that's my comment.
Well, you will be surprised because Plato has the same position, because you have to distinguish when Plato was speaking about the gods of the city of Athens. The way he's talked to his disciple is that respect the traditional beliefs, but stay away from them. Okay, so I play the devil's advocate here because I want to stress the fact that uh, Plato was participating in wars. He has been sold as a slave by Denis of Syracuse, and he was a very practical man too. And you know that Greece at the time of Plato in the 4th century BCE was a plague with local wars between Sparta, Athens, and Corinth, and etc. I don't want to name all the Greek cities. A little bit like what happened in China during the same time. I might appear a little bit stubborn, but I insist on that thing. Okay, Plato was a perfect Greek gentleman, meaning that he was neither a bastard nor a clumsy nerd. And Confucius was a perfect Chinese gentleman, meaning that he was neither a bastard nor a clumsy nerd. They are both true man because they had an inside and an outside. And I think that it's a certain presentation of them that would insist more on the fact that one is more idealistic and the other is more practical. And I think that we would not understand neither one nor the other if we don't give back to each the piece that is not put to the forefront in the traditional education for one and for the other.
Well said.
And everything that Peter said on historical things, I agree 2000%. We read the same books, Peter.
Okay, the next question, Lev wanted you to maybe go into the difference between Lao Tzu and Confucius. And if you wanted to expand on that question, Lev, feel free to.
Okay.
Oh, Lev, you're on mute, by the way, if you have something to add to that. It's usually at the bottom left-hand side of your screen. There's the option to unmute.
Okay, so Lao Tzu and Sun Tzu are different, aren't they? Lao Tzu,
Yes,
Sun Tzu and Lao Tzu are different.
Okay.
absolutely. They are two different people. Sun Tzu was an aristocrat of the kingdom of Qi, working for the kingdom of Wu. And Lao Tzu was a common man, but of high wisdom, living at the center of China. So they were two perfectly distinct persons.
Hmm. Okay, I just wanted to, I wanted to be sure that they are different persons. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions?
I think there was a question from Malcolm, Cynthia. Oh,
Okay.
that was sent to me privately. Okay, sorry. So Malcolm has a problem with his microphone, so he asked that we just read this. So Malcolm says, Quan, thank you for the lecture. I love the clear simplicity of Chinese language characters and their contextual interpretation. But I need to be born Chinese to really fully appreciate this, I feel. My questions. So here's the questions. 2 definitions in my personal summary of studies. Confucius gives the formula for correct human communal living. Plato, he says, as a Stoic, gives an intellectual analysis as a cosmic spiritual principle, abstract logical principle, or logos. I would place these 2 men in the human economy as Confucius practical and pragmatic, and then he says abdomen-centered as center of the human body, and Plato as rational and idealistic or head-centered. And then he ends that up by saying, it is said that Plato, when given a task of running a state, failed completely because he was not, quote, practical and pragmatic. He could not deal with the dynamics of practical life and cut and thrust, so to speak. In your understanding and research, do you have a view on these comments? That's it.
Yes. Well, thank you for the question, because I think it's, I'm sorry, because they're words appearing and it unfocused me. Okay, thank you for the question, Malcolm. I think that because of the words that we have from Plato and the words that we have from Confucius, I think it's natural that we tend to perceive one as more practical and the other as more idealistic. But I would say that Confucius, being a practical man, was also a failed politician as Plato. Okay, maybe you know that, but Confucius was exiled from his principality of Lu for 14 years because he was not capable to deal with court politics, and he has been how can I say it? He has been the loser in the shenanigans of court politics, okay? As Plato has been more or less a loser in the court politics with Denis of Syracuse, since he has been sold as a slave, as you know. In that sense, but I think that both were guided by principles, okay? Once again, let's go back to the fundamental meaning of the word philosopher, okay? A philosopher is someone who loves wisdom, okay? And wisdom can be synthesized by three principles according to me, which are beauty or justice, goodness, and truth. And I feel from the reading from the books from the words of Plato and from the words of Confucius, that both men were animated by the desire to bring justice, beauty, goodness, and truth into their city. And in that sense, they were both philosopher, and I don't want to use the word ideal versus practical, okay? And please believe me, nothing personal, because I think that it's a false and I think it's a false dichotomy, because we have a body. So by the mere fact that we have a body, we need to deal with practical things, okay? As Jean-Paul Sartre said in French, nous sommes condamnés à être libres, we are condemned to be free, okay? So the fact that we have a body, we are condemned to deal with practical things. But at the same time, we have a mind that doesn't take into account the bodily limits. And of course, the mind of certain person are more developed than the minds of others. But I think that we can take for granted that the minds of Plato and the minds of Confucius were not limited. So I would say that both were fully human, okay? What I mean by fully human, I call them true man, okay? Because maybe it's my stubbornness here, because I don't want to call Plato an idealist, and I don't want to call Confucius a practical man. I call both of them true man. They were true man because they were faithful to the infinity of their mind, of their pure awareness. And I think that both of them express it very clearly. Plato in the Republic and Socrates in the short quotation from the Lundu that I said, chapter 2, section 4. And both by their lives, by their practical lives, were fully participant to the politics of their times. And they even pay a dear price, in the case of Confucius, by 14 years of exile, and in the case of Plato, by being mistreated and sold as a slave. So they were true men because they lived to the full the mental, the spiritual dimensions, but also the practical and everyday life dimensions in their own societies. And I want to insist, both society at the time were both violent, okay? Because when we speak of Confucius, we have a tendency to speak of the war between the Chinese principalities of the time. But at the time of Plato, there were plenty of war between the city-state too. So they were both in very violent and very disruptive societies.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your question.
All right, Magdalena has a question on, well, she would like you to explain the triangle concept again, but I know it's a lot to go through, so either if you want to summarize it or perhaps guide people to a place they could find out more about it.
But the triangle is my invention, so
oh, it's your invention.
So I wouldn't have to repeat it in. If you give me 3 minutes, I can do
or
it.
Or
no,
you can
I just wanted. Sorry, I just wanted the words because I wrote the other ones down, but I was not.
Okay. I can repeat.
Yeah.
I can repeat it in 3 minutes. Okay.
Yes,
so
please.
you have the center of the triangle, which is the chariot with the 2 horses and with the charioteer symbolizing the journey of consciousness. Okay. Now you have the 3 inner corners. The left inner corner is justice, ethics, and politics. The right inner corner is education and justice. The top inner corner is the other 3 major virtues, which is moderation, wisdom, and courage. Okay? It's okay for the 3 inner corners?
Yes.
Okay, now the 3 outer corners. The left outer corners is called MC. Okay, why I say MC? Because it's for the memory. MC, yeah. MD, ME. Okay, let's start for MC. MC, M is for mythology and conversation. Okay, what I mean by mythology and conversation is narratives, paradigms, psyops, social engineering, all that kind of things. Okay, MD, M is for modelization, and D is for diplomacy. Okay, so it's geopolitics and geostrategy, if we want to be short. Okay, and ME is for the military and the economy.
Okay, so Quan, people are rightly.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
No problem.
they're rightly very curious about this this triangle concept, which I missed that you actually were the creator of it. That's pretty impressive. Maybe you could do a short write up, or like an explanation of this
a
concept.
painting,
or
I call for a painting
with
Yes,
an
maybe.
explanation
Yes.
to it. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, because once again, that triangle, my deep desire, okay, by that triangle is to show that all man, all woman are truly universal. And those two philosophers, Plato and Confucius, by their life, by their insight, by their mind, by their philosophy, were truly gentlemen. They had an inner life and they had an outer life, and they truly pay by their persons, okay, being exiled, being sold as a slave. So they were not simply ordinary philosopher in the modern sense, okay? They truly were living their principles, and they pay for their principles.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking to myself as well that Mencius, the student of Confucius, also was working with the followers of Confucius as a school to create a philosopher king too. And I remember reading something where Mencius was writing to somebody else that he was disappointed that his efforts at one point, I forget the situation, had gone up in smoke, but he would put a lot of effort into creating a sort of political reform at a certain moment, which was sabotaged or just didn't work. But the same thing for Plato students as well with the academy, right? They were all always, yeah.
And if you remember our discussion last Wednesday, okay, the comparison with between Kepler and Tycho Brahe, okay, the difference with Kepler is that he was enthusiastic. He had agape, okay, and it was that agape that nourished him during all his life. And once again, I think that it's not Plato or Confucius who are important in my presentation. It's agape. Okay, I want to show is that if we human can lift ourselves to the level of the aristocratic man and the aristocratic women, to have agape, in the inside of the triangle, the society, which is the outside of a triangle, wouldn't happen spontaneously. Okay. And also with what we discussed many times in our group of the Rising Tide Foundation, that knowledge is not easy, okay, because the oligarchical falsity would say that knowledge is easy and practicality is difficult. It's not true, okay? If you have the true knowledge, the accomplishment of the practical things will happen spontaneously or almost spontaneously.
I think Luke's question is a good continuation on that thought. Besides Luke wanting you, Quan, to send out possibly a good translation of the Confucius work that you're referring to, like a good English translation if there is one.
Yes,
Luke,
there's one.
Okay,
or French.
Great.
And
or
it's
French,
it's by Robert Eno. You want a French one? I don't know a good French one, but a good English one is by Robert Eno.
Okay, and we'll send it out by email too, and we'll include it in the publication of this class. And Luke, you had a question on uniting the Christian Trinity, possibly with this idea. Did you want to expand on that question?
Yeah, well, just Quan, first of all, your class was really inspirational. Like you brought a really new concept for us to think about, and the way that you used your time was very efficient, I think. But when you said that, or perhaps you reminded us that this was your creation, I'm just curious to know if there's any what role that did Christianity may have contributed to developing your thought, or how can we unite your triangle idea with maybe Christian Trinity? I don't know if that sparks anything which you can elaborate on.
Yes, thank you for your question, because your question is very interesting, because the history of religion has always been one of my enthusiasms, if you want. Okay, and I always think that the history of mankind is truly the adventure to the journey of precisely of the center of the triangle. Okay, I used Confucius' words today and Plato's word today, but we can use a Christian word too. Okay, when you say, I have to admit that I prefer Plato, beauty, goodness, and truth, but it doesn't matter. Okay, the Christian Trinity also inspire me, of course, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Okay, and I think that that Trinity is exactly equivalent to beauty, goodness, and truth. Okay, truth being God the Father, it's obvious. Okay, I think that anyway, it's not for nothing that I'm in writing Thai Foundation, because I absolutely agree with the principles and the philosophy that is transmitted in this group, in the sense of classical philosophy. And when Christianity as school of truth and of principles has been capable to produce people like the Cardinal Nicholas de Cusa, and the people like Kepler, like Johannes, like Gottfried Leibniz. They were all Christians, and their scientific work has been inspired by the Christian principles, which is the Western way to transport, to incarnate, to embody those eternal truth. So it's obvious for me that the Christian Trinity is another way to express beauty, goodness, and truth, which is my favorite way to say it, but it doesn't matter. It's only a personal preference.
If I can follow up, your idea, which is really, to me, incredible, is that we always think of the triangle limited to inside the triangle, but you have forced us, or you have inspired us to think of outside the triangle at the same time, and you've painted the three corners of outside corners, which is still I find it interesting, and the fact that you have your internal soul, which can be replicated outside of yourself, and this is why you're talking about the true man as a model that can be replicated by any individual. That's very creative concept. I commend you on it.
Thank you very much. And it was truly my core message, like Stephen understood. Thank you. You understood me too. Thank you very much. It's it's a good thing for a man to be understood.
It's funny because Stephen actually referred to himself as a barbarian, Stephen the Barbarian, before he asked his question. But no, he's actually quite intelligent. He doesn't give himself enough credit. Okay, Peter, I know that you have a comment on your interpretation of virtue in philosophy in Chinese writing. Did you want to share your thoughts?
Actually, this is just my own personal interest in the Chinese writing. It does not like infringe on what Dr. Lei discussed earlier, but just in interpretations of Chinese characters, there are many, and I would suggest that when I study the Chinese characters and want to understand those pictures, I usually go to the earliest forms, And so, for example, the word "the" in virtual, actually the earliest writing oracle bones, which goes back to like 15, 16 BCE in China, and written by the shanks on turtle shells. So those are the most ancient, and they are usually pictograms, because having new meanings, that takes time to develop. So the earliest were basically a drawing to represent something, and this word, which in the ancient times even to mean someone or a quality of saintliness, of being able to do good, being noble, is actually on the left side, the word meaning taking action, the same.
Exactly.
So it is something that requires action. It's not just by thought. And the other one on the right side is actually an eye. So it's an eye with a line, straight line pointing to heaven. So
Exactly.
so you can interpret that as an eye looking at heaven. Whereas in the later forms, starting from the bronze scripts, you have a heart underneath the eye.
Yes.
But the earliest one do not have the heart.
Yeah. And I'm sorry to cut you, Peter, but I'm so happy that you stressed that once again. Okay, you have the mind, the heart, and the action. Okay, so to be virtuous, to be a man, is truly to combine the mind, the heart, and the hands. Okay, the hands being the symbol for everything physical. All right, so once again, virtus in Latin is manly, upright, strength. Okay. Uh, well, thank you again, Peter. You are not the one who understand me. I feel understood today. Thank you, Cynthia, for inviting me, so I can feel understood today.
I think it's us who need to thank you, Quan. That was a very nice dialogue. Really beautiful. Are there any last thoughts before we end for today? No? Okay. Well, next class, it's going to be myself presenting, and I'm going to be going through a little bit of the Plato's Republic as well, and some of the geopolitical roles that he also played that we tend not to be taught about in mainstream education. So it will be similar. It'll be a branch off of this discussion, really a continuation. Yeah, go ahead.
Cynthia, can I have 3 minutes?
Of course.
Okay. Because before leaving, I want to stress that at the center of the triangle, precisely, that represent the journey of consciousness, the charioteer in the chariot. Okay, the chariot being the body, the white horse being anger, the black horse being greed, if you read your Plato again. But the charioteer is, you imagine at the level of the heart of the charioteer, being the plutocratic man. At the level of the throat is being the democratic man. Okay, the plutocratic man here, the democratic man here. At the level of the forehead is the aristocratic man, and at the top of the head is the monarch. Okay, I just want to give you that last image so you can remember easily the plutocrat, the democrat, the aristocrat, and the monarch.
Okay. Thank you. And a lot of people have thanked you in the chat section as well, Quan, and we'll hopefully get you to maybe do some diagrams too of this wonderful philosophical imagery. And we'll also include good translations of the Republic and the Confucius work that you were referencing today. So again, thank you, Quan, so much.
Thank you, Quan.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Until next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ciao.
Yeah.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you. And thank you, Cynthia and Matthew, for just putting this presentation on. It was, you know, we need it. We need this very much.
Yes.
More to
Thank you
come.
for- yeah. All right.
You ain't seen nothing yet.